Hey guys, welcome. Today's video is going to show you how to replace the microphone jack on your Sony A7 III or your A7R3. My microphone jack recently stopped recording audio to the left channel, so I went ahead and ordered one from AliExpress. I'll put that link down below so you can order the same one. Now, the audio not coming in properly through your microphone jack is a huge pain in the neck. It was only recording to one channel and I had to fix it in post. And then eventually it just started creating a bunch of static noise, and I eventually couldn't record audio through that port anymore. So I wasn't able to find any videos on the replacement procedure on YouTube, so I went ahead and made you this one. I've tried to make the video as short as possible without leaving out any details, so this was my first time taking this camera apart. Now I do confess I have a little bit of experience in small electronics repair, but this repair is not hard and can be done successfully by anyone with some patience and a simple iFixit tool. So went ahead, as you can see, we're getting started here, just removing the bottom plate and the screws that go along with it. I'm using the 000 Phillips head on the iFixit kit. I'll link that down below too if you want to see the one I used. It's really an older kit, they make nicer ones now, but it still gets the job done. Now there's 3 screws on the side. These were the easiest ones to find besides the bottom one. And you'll notice in this video a couple times I'm kind of looking around the camera, just figuring out where the screws are, what's holding what in place. Those 2 on the side there by the SD card. And then when you remove the little rubber ring that goes around the viewfinder, you'll find 4 screws there, as well as a 5th screw that holds in the focus wheel for the viewfinder. And all 5 of those need to be removed. And when you're removing these screws, try and do your best to line them up, as you can see how I'm doing up to the right, just so that you know which screw goes where. And I try to make a picture of how it goes onto the camera so that it's easier to reassemble later. So you'll find a screw that's behind the LCD. It's only a single screw, a shorter one, and that needs to be removed. Here I'm just kind of testing how loose it is and noticing that I believe I have to remove this front grip piece. It's just stuck on there with some adhesive. I didn't even need any heat, peeled off pretty easy. If it's giving you a tough time, you could use a hair dryer or a heat gun to remove it. But there's 2 big silver screws right on the side, and those will need to come off so that you can start separating. Now I removed this screw here in the battery compartment. I don't believe it needed to be removed. I did anyways, so if you're not having any luck getting it off, maybe try removing that screw, but you may not have to. Like I said, here I am realizing that that focus wheel and the screw does need to come off. And I'm just doing some gentle prying, kind of seeing where it's still holding on to the main body, if I've missed any screws. And sure enough, I did. I missed this screw right here under the microphone jack port. You would have thought that would have been the first one I removed, but anyways, that seemed to be holding it all together. So just very gently separating it, doing a little prying here and there, knowing that this whole back panel is most likely connected to the board, and here it is. Just a little jaw connector. Use your fingernail or the tool. Be very gentle and go ahead and set that aside. So I'm just kind of inspecting what I need to do. I'm realizing there's some screws holding the main board in. Firstly, I'm going to disconnect all these flexes. Now you want to be very careful with these jaw connectors, so they all will flip up, and use the tool, whatever you find works best. I started with the tweezers, but they weren't really working for me, so instead I used this flat spudger, and that seemed to lift it without a problem. And now any of these connectors that have the solid white piece where there's no bracket to lift up or down, you want to just push on the sides of the flex here. very gently and kind of go back and forth so that it pulls out all at once. I found that a dental pick really got the job done really well here, but just want to be careful not to rip anything. Take your time, just wiggle it out of there from the hard tabs that are on the left and right there. You can kind of see those tabs. And then I'm just continuing lifting these jaw connectors and always using the tabs on either side of the flex to push it out. If you pull on the flex on the back side, you have a chance of ripping it or puncturing it, and of course you don't want to do that. So always try to remove the flexes by the tabs that are on the sides of them. And just worked around here. Now, if you ask me what all of these flexes do, with a little, looking and inspecting, I'm sure I could tell you, but really that's not important and you don't need to know, as long as you know that you removed them safely and put them back where they came from. We're here to replace that microphone jack port, so that's what we'll do, and that's all we're going to worry about. So gently lift up the adhesive holding on these flexes. You'll find that there's a couple more just under there. And I can tell you what those do, because at first I forgot to plug them back in, and those control, those two flexes that were kind of hidden under that black tape, those control the front lens mount. So there you have it. I'm just removing the headphone jack cover here. This is where you plug your headphones in to monitor your audio. And I've realized that if I'm going to get this board out, I have to remove the entire top piece of the camera, because you'll notice there's a little metal bracket just above my left finger there, my index finger, and under that bracket there's a screw that holds the motherboard, and there's no getting to that screw without removing the top of the camera. That's what's attached to that metal bracket right there. Now, I wasn't expecting to have to remove this top part of the camera, so I'm kind of reassessing my angle of attack here, seeing what would be holding this top part of the camera in. So I'm just kind of taking a look here, and I've realized that I'm sure there's some screws under this viewfinder, so you do have to remove this here. And it just pulls out, there's nothing holding it in. We've already removed all the screws that hold it in, and it just slides right out. I'm just seeing if I've missed any screws or anything that might be holding this top part in. Coming up here, you'll notice I remove a couple screws. These were not helpful at all, and you don't need to remove them. You'll see I actually put them back. But there's one on the side and one underneath here, as you see here. Now there is one in that location, as you'll see shortly, but it wasn't this little black one. So I'll actually be putting that little black one back. And then I also removed one from the side up here, and this one is in fact one that holds in the top piece. So I went ahead, I put those two back for now, but the one top piece will be removed. So I've kind of just, I took a step away, kind of got a drink of water, decided to come back, and I realized that there's some screws here on the side. Now this iFixit screwdriver with the attachment had trouble getting in there. It was pretty deep, so I had to use another Phillips head that had a thinner shaft, something that would go in deeper into the camera. But kind of that adapter piece was getting hung up. And then you'll also see that there's two screws underneath the eye viewfinder. You can see them right there. So I'm just going to go ahead and get those removed. There's 4 silver screws holding in the top part of this camera. One on each side, the left and the right, and 2 of these black screws. See here, I am taking that one back out on the front of the hand grip, one on the right, and then there's actually going to be one on the left side of that, kind of where my right index finger is right now. Again, I've never taken this apart before as I was recording this, so I was kind of learning as I went. Again, it wasn't too hard, just took some patience, kind of observing how it was put together. So these two screws here are part of the 4 silver ones holding it in. So there's 2 in the eye viewfinder, and then 1 on the left and 1 on the right that are pretty deep in there. And you'll see I'm attempting to take this top part off, not yet realizing that there is a screw there, like I mentioned before, that needs to come out. And you'll see there's only 3 silver screws there, so I'll find this other 4th one here in a moment. That left side of the top of the camera is coming off pretty easy, but something's still kind of holding me up on that right side, and it is again that 4th silver screw. And there it is, you can see it from that angle there. And that's why I make these videos. Hindsight's 2020. Hopefully this will save you guys some frustration, give you a little more confidence going into the repair, knowing I've already kind of figured it out for you. You can reference this video, make your life a lot easier. But I thought it was pretty fun. I wanted to do it on my own. And eventually I will find that screw. Just take some time. And there it is. This one, for whatever reason, was in there really tight. Had a bunch of Loctite on it, red Loctite. And this is that thinner screwdriver that I used before. But actually this big one worked. I thought I wasn't making good contact because it was in there so tight, so I actually had to use 2 hands to loosen it, but it did come out. Like I said, there was just a lot of thread locker, Loctite, whatever you want to call it on there, really holding that screw in tight. It did come out. And I'm just keeping those lined up so I know where they go. So with any luck, this top part should slide right off. And there it is. Set that aside, make sure not to knock any of your screws around. And that little plastic piece was just over the headphone jack. And now we're going to remove the little plastic covering that goes over the 2 flex connectors, one being the headphone jack for monitoring audio, and the other being the actual microphone jack port that we are replacing. Again, these are the ones that you have to slide out, use the tabs on the side, and just wiggle them back and forth using the dental pick. Worked really well for me. And those just slide right out. Now our motherboard is loose. Just kind of checking it out, seeing what could potentially still be connected. Realizing that these flex connectors need to go through this little hole here. And I missed a connector earlier. So being gentle here, as you can see, the top of the board here has the Wi-Fi connector attached, and there's another flex cable. So gently remove the Wi-Fi connector and the flex cable. So I'm sliding the flex cable out here with the dental pick. And next you'll see I pop up the little Wi-Fi connector. I use a pair of tweezers. And that just pops right off. One more flex connector there. And now the board is free. Gently feed these connectors through the little hole in the PBA there. what you know, there's one more connector. And she's free. Now if you need to replace an HDMI port or USB-C port or anything like that, kind of be done, but we're replacing that microphone head jack, so we got to keep digging deeper. This metal plate that you see here kind of sits behind the sensor. So first you got to remove the headphone jack, and that's the flex to the microphone jack that we'll be replacing. And there's 4 screws that hold in this plate, kind of in the 4 corners. And always take your time. Don't just go lifting on parts or forcing anything. If it's not coming off, it's probably for good reason. It's probably attached somewhere by a screw. Here there's a screw hidden under this little black piece of tape, and that was holding in this plate. And then that just lifts right off. On the back of this plate, it looked like there was a little watch battery, and this must store all your settings and date and time for when you turn your camera off. And there's not a rechargeable battery in there that stores all of your settings. So continuing on, going deeper, here we're actually on the back side of the sensor of the camera, and it's held in with 6 screws, 2 in each kind of the 3 out of the 4 corners there, and each of them has a longer screw and a shorter screw. One is also thicker than the other, you'll see there if you look on the mat. And on the bottom you kind of have to remove this sticky tape, as well as on the top there's some more. And then the sensor pops right out. And it's a pretty heavy sensor. There's a lot of weight to it. I was surprised by how heavy it was. And I actually just used the bag that the microphone jack came in and just put it in there to keep it from getting scratched or dusty. And then you're just left with the shell. After that, we've removed just about everything in this camera. But don't be afraid. We'll get it put back together. These 3 little pieces kind of fell as I flipped the camera over, and those just go down before you put the sensor back on. I'll show you that in a little bit. And now it's time to remove the part that we came here for, and that is the microphone jack itself. There's a couple screws holding it in, and it's kind of just wedged in there. I wish I could explain it better, but it's easy to figure out, and you'll see once you get there. It's really just kind of wiggles out, and the whole left side piece there actually needs to come up, and when you bring that up, the whole thing kind of just falls apart. Sorry, like I said, I wish I could explain it better, but it's really just, it's hard to explain without seeing it. But if you made it this far, you won't have any problem figuring it out. So once you get it out, kind of got to separate it. It's held in, slides right out. That's the piece I was referring to before, and you're left holding the new one, or excuse me, the old one. Just jumped out of my hands. You'll see there's a little black piece that isn't on the new one, so we'll have to transfer that over, and it's just these little black clips kind of hold on to the board. With a little finagling, it pops right off, and then you can just place it onto the new one. Set the old one aside, make sure not to get them mixed up. You don't want to reinstall the old one. And that little black piece just kind of sits on top. little gentle push pops it into place. And it's ready to go back in. So start by sliding it into the side piece and just reversing how you got it out. It just kind of slides back in. Nothing too technical. Pay attention to the way the flex kind of sits on top of the port. There's these little notches, and they kind of sit in the little notches there. Side piece just slides back in, right where we took it from, and the two screws that hold it in. Once those are in, we can put our sensor back, remembering to put back these three little pieces. Kind of need a pair of tweezers, they're really hard to hold. I've got short nubby fingers to begin with, so those didn't offer me any extra help. Tweezers were pretty necessary on getting them to sit on there properly, and they only fit one way, so there's no screwing it up. Making sure not to pinch any of the flexes underneath the sensor. Kind of have to fish them out. Once the sensor's in place, replace the screws. Remembering there's two different sizes, but it's pretty hard to get them mixed up. And replace the tape on the top and bottom. Now fish back through the flex that goes through this plate that was held in by the 4 screws. Actually, don't fish that in, as you see here. That was a test. This will actually end up getting taken back out because on the right side there, you'll see that it'll kind of pinches on the flex right there where I just touched with the tweezers, and you don't want that. So those actually don't go through that hole. Those, my memory failed me, those go through the main board. So what that hole's for is actually those two little flexes right there. And so leave that big long flex out to the side, put the two little flexes through the middle, and replace those 4 screws. Now I purposely didn't cut out my mistakes or do any jump cuts in this video because I didn't want you to get lost. I've seen videos do that before, and all of a sudden they're 2 steps ahead. And I was like, what the heck happened? So that's why this video is a little long, and I didn't cut anything out. I wanted you to see everything in the whole process. So here you can see me, I'm replacing the main board. I got that flex put in on top because you kind of have to fold it over, and it seemed easier to put it in before getting it set down into the frame. Gently feed these 2 flexes through. Now is the time to put them through. And again, make sure you're not pinching any of the flexes under the board. There's a few on top, a few on bottom. I'm just kind of releasing them before I set the board back down. Now, don't make this mistake like I did. I put this top part on before replacing the screw that holds the motherboard down that was under that little metal bracket. So you'll see here that I'm going to have to take it back off to replace that screw. Just feeding in these connectors, remembering to push on the sides, being gentle. Remember, don't force anything. For any reason it's not fitting, take your time. See, I also forgot to put the headphone jack in. Still haven't managed to get that motherboard screw back in, so this will have to come apart one more time. I think I do edit this out just for the sake of time, but at some point I will remove that top piece again and get that screw back in. And really, there's not much else I can tell you here. You know, you can just kind of use this video for reference, putting it back together and the process. I'm gonna skip through this pretty quick, but it's the same way you took it out, just goes right back in. Just carefully reconnecting all these connectors, replacing the black tape, and also don't forget under those your two long ribbons that we fished through the motherboard, don't forget that there's two connectors under there that need to be reconnected. I think here, I think you can see that I did forget to reconnect those, so save yourself the hassle, reconnect those. Also, don't forget the black screw in the motherboard, otherwise you're gonna have to undo what you're watching right now to get that top piece back off. Just put that black screw back in. DVF slides back in place, reconnect the two connectors. Another mistake I made was putting this on too soon. This actually goes on after the back frame goes back on, otherwise you won't be able to fit it over. And I'll find this out real soon. And that's got to come back out. Just take your time here. Don't force anything. Don't squeeze anything. Don't use any excessive pressure. If it's not fitting on, there's probably a good reason. Just kind of inspect it, go around, see what's causing it to hang up. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just taking my time. I realized that I placed the screw in a little prematurely, so I took that out, realized that was my problem over there. Now the two screws you see me placing on the side there, those are actually not the correct screws. You'll want to put the silver ones there, which I eventually do. Like I said, again, I kept this video raw. I didn't want it jumping around. I wanted you to see the mistakes I made so that hopefully it prevents you from making the same mistakes. You can learn from them by watching this video and then go into your own repair much more confidently. Now this little EVF wheel has a little notch, sits in there. It's pretty self-explanatory. It took me a couple times to get it right. Eventually I do. And I replaced all the screws on the outside. Place that screw in the battery port that I may or may not have needed to take out in the first place. Placed all the other screws. Make sure to put them back where they came from. And right here I realized that those black ones don't belong there, but the silver ones do. And that's the benefit of kind of lining up your screws, because when you start backtracking you start to realize you have screws in a place, and it kind of jogs your memory and you start to figure out where they went. If you guys thought this video was helpful, please consider hitting that thumbs up button, helps a ton. And just replacing the bottom plate, just as we started. And we're just about finished. And there you have it. And that is the A7iii, A7R3 microphone jack replacement. Let's go ahead and pop a battery in. Make sure everything works, considering we had every screw almost out of this, and every connector and the sensor and the motherboard all has to come out. Moment of truth. And it pops on. Now, because we unplugged that battery, we do have to reset our time and date. But I did notice that all my other settings were still there after I changed the time and date. So all my picture profiles and all those were still saved. So I'm assuming those get saved to that little board with that little watch battery. Here I put a microphone on, moment of truth. And as you can see, we're recording to both channels. That, my friends, is a successful repair. One that you can do yourself. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time.